Hi, I'm Luann Johnson, and I attended Dinfos twice, once for basic journalism school and the second time for broadcast specialist school. And I recently looked on the website and I can see that the world has definitely changed at Dinfos. I went to Fort Harrison in Indiana. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for the Hall of Fame ceremony. It's truly an honor. I have to say, though, that I feel like I'm being honored for following my heart. When I was asked to do a guest lecture, I said sure, because I really think it's important for writers to support each other. And I've had people that have really helped me during my career, so I think it's important to pass that on. But as I started thinking about it, I thought the world of military journalism is very different from when I was there. For one thing, because I was female, I was only allowed to be the weather girl. I wasn't allowed to anchor the news, and I was told that a woman didn't belong there. That was only by one person, but unfortunately it was my XO, so he had the final say. Well, he had the final say then. I've had a few says of my own since. But what I thought I might be able to share with you is some of the things that I've learned about writing. There's one thing that was stressed when I was at Dinfos, and that was journalistic integrity. And I see a real lack of that in the commercial media these days. And I think it's sad, because I realize that people want to be published. But what I don't understand is why, when someone makes up things and clearly lies, for example, creating fake research and then winning a Pulitzer and then finding out that the person was, that it was not true, to me that's fraud. And instead of saying, well, you can't be a journalist anymore because you're not trustworthy, then that person goes on and writes a bestseller. To me, this seems not only wrong, but I have to wonder whether that writer truly feels any sense of accomplishment other than getting attention. Which brings me to the real point that I want to make. I had an editor one time who said to me, Luann, you can choose to look at writing as a business or as an art. If you look at it as a business, then you write what's popular, what editors are looking for, and you sell it. If you look at it as art and you write what you feel like compelled to write, then you may or may not be published. I think she was wrong, because I have most of my life written the things that I felt compelled to write. Even, for example, I remember it took me years. I wanted to get a story in the Navy Times so badly, so I wrote lots of them, but it wasn't until I actually wrote a story about a man who was a survival training guy, but his trunk of his car was filled with rattlesnakes and things like that. And he was such an interesting person that when I wrote that story, my interest in him translated to the page, and other people were interested as well. And that was a story that was accepted by the Navy Times. The same thing happened to me years later. I didn't learn the lesson right away. I was working on a novel while I was teaching high school. And when I was talking to an editor, I kept talking about the kids that I was teaching and how much I loved them and how I was so proud of them for overcoming the obstacles in their lives. And she said, you need to write about them. And I said, I can't write a book about teaching. I've only been teaching 3 years. People will say, who does she think she is? She said, no, don't write about teaching. Write about the stories you're telling me. She said, as soon as you start talking about them, I love those kids and I think other people will too. So I wrote about those kids, and they became, my book was titled My Posse Don't Do Homework. And of course it was adapted very, very loosely for the movie Dangerous Minds. And the reason that book was attractive to people and appealing was because my heart was there. I truly loved my students, and I think it translated to the page. The same thing's happening now. I'm writing books for kids, but I'm writing the kind of books that I wanted to read as a kid, and I'm writing about animals that I adopted or rescued, and obviously I feel strongly about that. So my advice is to follow your heart. And then one last little thing I want to share with you. There is no net profit in Hollywood. So the movie based on my memoir made, I think, upwards of $200 million. And I got 0 in royalties. And as my agent explained to me, you signed for 2% of the net. You should have known better. And he was my agent. However, he's right. I should have known better. I didn't do my homework. I didn't investigate the situation. I just assumed that everyone would be telling me the truth. I wasn't not so smart. But it was an expensive lesson, but fortunately I've never needed to be a millionaire in the first place. I think life is an adventure. And that's actually why I joined the Navy. I have to say, I grew up in a very small town in Pennsylvania. I had never even stayed overnight at anyone's house. I never saw anybody who wasn't white. I'd never eaten in a restaurant. I went off to college. I stayed for a month and I came home because I was overwhelmed. I said to my mother, I don't know how to go to college. She went down to the local post office during a blizzard, and I live in northwestern Pennsylvania. And she came home with a brochure from the Navy. And it showed some women driving yellow gear, and she said, look at this, honey, I think they're letting the girls drive the boats now. And I think you could be a journalist, and they'll pay for you to go to college, and it won't be just a job, honey. It'll be an adventure. Why don't you try it? And so I did. My mother was right. It was an adventure, and I hope it's an adventure for you. And I say good luck to you all. Ahoy there, mateys.